Chapter 46. Gail Sheehy. The following are quotes from her 1976 book, Passages. We are not unlike a particularly hardy crustacean. The lobster grows by developing and shedding a series of hard protective shells. Each time it expands from within, the confining shell must be sloughed off. It is left exposed and vulnerable until, in time, a new covering grows to replace the old. They had married at 25, and for several years they seemed to be typically eager people, enjoying the new experiences of a typical marriage within the professional class. I knew them as friends, but nothing about the quality of the threads that bound them as a couple, except a sense that, by now, they had their tangles, like the rest of us. In a nutshell, what seem like very personal changes are often simply transitions from one season of life to another. Books in a similar vein: Erik Erikson's Young Man Luther and Carl Rogers' On Becoming a Person. As a reporter, Gail Sheehy was sent to do a story on the conflict in Northern Ireland and got caught up in the events of Bloody Sunday, a Catholic civil rights march in Derry in which 14 civilians, mostly young, were killed by British forces. The day might have remained simply a bad memory, were it not for the fact that right in front of her, she witnessed a boy have his face blown away by a bullet. Returning to America, she took stock of her life. At 35, suddenly her lifestyle of journalistic travel did not seem enough. She felt she had been a performer in life, not really participating in it, even though she had had a child and been married and divorced. Her whole jerry-built world, as she describes it, threatened to come apart. She had seen herself as an optimistic, fearless, loving, and ambitious good girl, but now she seemed to be looking at the dark side, at what was possibly halfway through her life. With this terrifying thought, she wondered, what do other people do when this happens to them? Some seemed to push themselves harder with their careers. Others began playing dangerous sports, or giving bigger parties, or taking younger people to bed. But she knew none of these things would fill the gaping hole in her psyche. Passages, Predictable Crises of Adult Life, was one of the publishing phenomena of the 1970s. The subject of adult life crises was not obviously hot, but with its distinctive cover, serialization in popular magazines, and Sheehy's talent for publicity, the book became a bestseller. The writing style is what you would expect of a classy magazine feature writer, pulling the reader in from the first page. It is easy to dismiss Passages as dated pop psychology, but many readers are moved to exclaim, "That's me," as they recognize themselves in Sheehy's descriptions of the stages of adult life, and the book has made many feel less alone as they negotiate life's rapids. Marker events and deeper crises. Sheehy realized that the terrible event she had witnessed was simply a trigger for deeper changes going on within her, some kind of midlife crisis. The experience sparked her interest in other people's turning points, and to her surprise, she discovered that these passages happened with predictable regularity at roughly the same ages. People tried to blame external events for how they were feeling, but as with herself, often the outer events were not the answer. Dissatisfaction with a life that had seemed fulfilling only a couple of years before indicated that there was something going on at another level. There was a difference between marker events, such as graduation, marriage, childbirth, and getting a job, which all obviously have an impact, she noted, and developmental stages that change us from within. We tend to attribute how we are feeling to the marker event itself, when more often the event is simply a catalyst to move us forward into another stage of life. Though uncomfortable and often painful, we should not fear these transition times, as ultimately they mean growth. If we choose to embrace the change, at least we know we are growing. Sheehy was influenced by psychologist Erik Erikson's idea that at certain turning points we can either move in the direction of personal growth or stay with the security of what we know. Either way, we experience change. The choice is whether we have more control and awareness over the process or allow it to happen to us. The stages of childhood and adolescent development have been exhaustively identified, Sheehy notes, but not much attention has been given to adults. To write passages, she immersed herself in the literature on life cycles, read a mountain of biographies, and began collecting life stories of people between the ages of 18 and 55. As most of the research related to men, she made sure that the book included the stories of plenty of real women. She also explored life changes within the dynamic of a couple and the stresses this can place on relationships. Changes through the decades. To make the life changes easier to grasp, Sheehy's innovation was to break them down into easy-to-understand decades. The 20s. In our 20s, we have to work out our path in life, discovering the ways of being or doing that give us a sense of aliveness and hope. We are likely to go one of two ways: to do what we should in terms of family and peer expectations, or to pursue adventure and find ourselves. We either seek security and commitments, or we avoid commitment altogether. A man in his 20s feels that he has to do well in his work or be ridiculed. His greatest love is his career. While women may not have the same pressure, if they go the stay-at-home child-rearing route, they may end up with less self-esteem compared to their male partners, who have very clear feedback on how they are doing. Women can begin to feel cut off from the world and valued less for who they are than for their role as a mother. While men in their 20s feel they can do anything, women often lose the confidence they had as adolescents. Couples in their 20s feel that they will overcome all obstacles. Yet behind this bravado is often a level of doubt or insecurity. Women often go for a stronger one, a man who can replace their family ties to some extent. But in doing this, women avoid their own work of development and may have to face it later. For example, the woman who marries young and changes significantly in her 30s, coming out of her husband's shadow. When we near the big 3-0, Sheehy notes, normally we feel dissatisfaction with the career or personal choices we have made, as if we have outgrown some of them. We have to chart new directions or make new commitments. We may want to change career or go back to work or start having children. If we have been in a relationship since our early 20s, we may even get the 7-year itch. Generally, Sheehy warns that if we don't have some kind of identity crisis in this pulling up roots period of our 20s, we will inevitably have one at a later point, when it may take a greater toll. The 30s. The 30s are the deadline decade. We suddenly realize, as Sheehy herself did, that there will be an end to our life at some point. Time starts to squeeze, which refines our priorities. While the 20s are the anything is possible decade, the 30s let us know that we may not have all the answers, and this can be a shock. We demand authenticity of ourselves and begin to see that we can't blame anything on anyone else. Women may have bet everything on their marriage and family, but their assertiveness may begin to rise as they realize that their life is not simply about pleasing others or living up to cultural norms. Life usually becomes a little more settled. We may tie ourselves to a certain career, and we may buy a house and put down roots. Men may feel that this is their last chance decade, in which they must become partner in the firm instead of the assistant, or become an established author instead of being young and promising. People of both sexes arrive at the conclusion that life is a lot more serious and difficult than they understood it to be in their 20s. The ages between 37 and 42 are peak years of anxiety for most people. In Sheehy's research, the age of 37 in particular came up again and again as a crisis year. The 40s. We feel a sense of stagnation or disequilibrium when we enter midlife. Those who have seemed to climb effortlessly upwards find that life catches up with them. Having intensely pursued a career, we may think, was it really worth it? Why didn't I have children? Many a man turning 40 feels underappreciated and burdened, with the sentiment, is this all there is? The good news is that in the mid-40s a certain equilibrium returns. For those with a renewed purpose, these can be the best years, as we see that no one can do it for us, and therefore we finally become master of our destiny in a more assured way. The motto of this stage of life, Sheehy suggests, might be, no more bullshit. We are who we are. A woman is likely to get more assertive, while a man may want to get more emotionally responsive, having put his emotional needs aside to strive for a career. The opposite sex can begin to lose its magic power over us, since we can now incorporate the opposite of our own sex within our psyches. We feel more independent, less likely to fall in love, but more capable of devotion to another person. Trying to be ourselves. The search for self-identity is what Jung called individuation, and Maslow termed self-actualization. Sheehy's phrase for it is gaining our authenticity. Whatever we want to call it, this is the aim of the successive life stages. At each point, we have the chance either to define ourselves further or to succumb to the ideas of the group and its expectations. We have two selves, the one that wants to merge with others and things, and the one that seeks creative independence and freedom. Throughout our lives, we may alternate between one and the other, or they compete within us at the same time. Many of our decisions may simply reflect a desire to get away from or differentiate ourselves from our parents. People often marry for this reason. Intriguingly, of all the couples Sheehy interviewed, none married for love alone. There was always a stronger reason. My girlfriend expected it. My family wanted it. In my culture, it is what you do at my age. For both sexes, a common reason was, I need someone to take care of me. The problem with this is that we come to judge a spouse on how well they take the place of a parent, rather than on their own merits as a person. This allows us to think, when we are not happy, that she won't let me do it, instead of taking responsibility for ourselves. To make things more difficult, a couple's development cycles will rarely be in tandem. When the man is growing and enthused, for instance, the woman may be going through a time of doubt and instability, and vice versa. A common result is that we blame each other for what we are experiencing, when the major change is really internal. Final comments. The chief enjoyment of passages lies in the vignettes of actual people, individuals and couples, whom Sheehy interviewed. Though these are now obviously out of date, there is still a timeless quality about the stories. She includes a quote from novelist Willa Cather. There are only 2 or 3 human stories, and they go on repeating themselves as fiercely as if they had never happened before. Having greater awareness of the stages of our lives does not mean that we are giving up all control. What it does is allow us to see that the problems that seem unique to us have probably been experienced by millions of others, and may have more to do with our time of life than the other people or situations we may be blaming. Since Passages was published, time frames for the stages of life seem to have changed. In mid-1970s America, the average marrying age was 21 for women and 23 for men. Today, with people settling down much later, it is almost expected that you will spend a few years of your 20s, and maybe even 30s, discovering what you want to do, and having minimum commitments. It is also more common for women to delay having children, or not to have them at all. And Sheehy did not consider life much beyond the 40s, an age when, given longer life expectancy, life really begins for many people. This begs the question, what form will transition points or life crises take when, as scientists predict, people are healthy even beyond the age of 100? Perhaps we will become more willing to see life as a series of inevitable transitions, separated by relatively stable periods. Maybe we will abandon the old distinction between youth and maturity, and instead see ourselves as fluid, continually evolving creations, instead of having a fixed identity. Gail Sheehy. Sheehy is well known for her incisive magazine character profiles, which have included George W. Bush, Mikhail Gorbachev, Newt Gingrich, Margaret Thatcher, and Saddam Hussein. A long-time contributing editor to Vanity Fair, she has won a number of awards for her journalism. Passages was on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 years and was translated into 28 languages. It was named one of the 10 most influential books of our time in a Library of Congress survey. Sheehy's other books include Pathfinders, 1981, The Silent Passage, Menopause, 1992, Understanding Men's Passages, 1998, Hillary's Choice, A Profile of Hillary Clinton, 1999, and Sex and the Seasoned Woman, 2006. To take account of changes in culture and society, Sheehy provided an updated version of her work in New Passages, 1995. Chapter 47. B. F. Skinner. The following are quotes from his 1971 book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. 2,500 years ago, it might have been said that a man understood himself as well as any other part of his world. Today, he is the thing he understands least. Physics and biology have come a long way, but there has been no comparable development of anything like a science of human behavior. The nomad on horseback in outer Mongolia and the astronaut in outer space are different people. But as far as we know, if they had been exchanged at birth, they would have taken each other's place. Although cultures are improved by people whose wisdom and compassion may supply clues to what they do or will do, the ultimate improvement comes from the environment which makes them wise and compassionate. In a nutshell, like all animals, humans are creatures shaped by their environment, but we also have the ability to adjust or create new environments. Books in a similar vein: Harry Harlow's The Nature of Love, Stanley Milgram's Obedience to Authority, Ivan Pavlov's Conditioned Reflexes, and Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate. One of the most controversial figures in the history of psychology, Skinner was famous for seeing humans as no different to animals. Even as a young psychology student, he rebelled against what he saw as the romantic idea that human action was the result of inner emotions, thoughts, and drives, the psyche. Rather, as Pavlov's work indicated, humans should be analyzed as animals, interacting with their environment. Yet, in his theory of operant behavior, Skinner went beyond Pavlov. Humans were not simply reflexive machines, he argued, but also changed their actions according to the consequences of their behavior. This philosophical distinction allowed for the incredible variety of human difference, while allowing adhesion to the behaviorist line that humans were basically creatures of their environment. Skinner became behaviorism's most famous exponent, partly because he was a brilliant experimenter. Pigeons were to Skinner as dogs were to Pavlov, but also because he could write. His combination of technical skill and a desire to see the big, philosophical picture was unusual, the result being esteem by his peers and the production of best-selling books that made people think. A Technology of Behavior. Beyond Freedom and Dignity was written at a time when issues such as overpopulation and nuclear war seemed a terrible threat. The very survival of the human species appeared to be at stake. What could be done? While Skinner noted that it was natural to try to solve the world's problems by advances in technology or science, he asserted that real solutions would only emerge when people's behavior changed. Having contraceptives was no guarantee that people would use them. Access to more advanced agricultural techniques did not ensure their application. People caused problems. Yet it was not enough to create a better relationship between people and technology, or even to personalize technology. Rather, what was needed was a technology of behavior. Skinner noted how little psychology had advanced compared to physics and biology. In ancient Greece, people's understanding of what made them tick was as good as their understanding of how the universe worked. But today, while our knowledge in the hard sciences had moved ahead by leaps and bounds, our understanding of ourselves was no greater. Creating a New Psychology. Skinner believed that the science of psychology looked for the causes of behavior in the wrong place, and was therefore fundamentally in error. We no longer believe that people are possessed by demons, he noted, yet psychology was still based on the view that our behavior was determined by indwelling agents. In Freudian psychology, for instance, the actions of one human body are driven by the interaction of not one but three of these inner elements: the id, the ego, and the superego. The medieval alchemists attributed to each person a mystical essence that shaped behavior, and today we believe in something called human nature that is said to move us. The result is that we are told that all the world's problems boil down to changing inner attitudes, overcoming pride, lessening the desire for power or aggression, increasing self-respect, creating a sense of purpose, and so on. Yet for Skinner, all such conceptions of human beings were pre-scientific. Physics and biology long ago gave up the idea that objects or animals are driven by an inner purpose, yet we still say that a non-physical feeling causes a physical act of aggression. It is a given that states of mind cause behavior. This mentalism, as Skinner called it, meant that behavior was not studied in its own right. Psychology of environment, not mind. Skinner noted that if we ask someone why they went to the theater, and they say, "I felt like going," we accept this as an explanation. However, it would be more accurate to know what has made them go in the past, what they have heard or read about the play, and any other environmental factors that led to their decision to go. We think of people as centers from which behavior emanates, when it is more accurate to see people as the end result of the influence of the world on them and their reactions to the world. We don't need to know about a person's state of mind, feelings, personality, plans, or purposes in order to study behavior. To know why people act as they do, Skinner suggested, all we need to know is what circumstances cause them to act in a certain way. Our environments are not simply the setting for our self-willed actions, but shape us into what we are. We change the course of our actions according to what we learn is good for us, our survival, or not so good. We believe that we act autonomously, but it is more accurate to observe that we act according to what reinforces our actions. Just as a species prospers or withers, depending on how it interacts with and adapts to its environment, so the person we are is the result of our interaction and adjustment to the world we are born into. Better environments, not better people. What is meant by Skinner's title, Beyond Freedom and Dignity? He acknowledged that the literature of freedom had been successful in the past in inspiring people to rebel against oppressive authorities. These writings naturally linked control and exploitation of humans with evil, and escape from that control as good. But Skinner found something missing from this simple equation. We have actually designed our societies to involve many different forms of control that are based on aversion or inducement instead of outright force. Most of these more subtle forms of control people are willing to submit to because they ultimately serve their own social and economic ends. For instance, millions of people hate their jobs, yet they stay because of the consequences of not working. They are controlled by aversion rather than force, but controlled nevertheless. Nearly all of us live in communities, and to maintain themselves, communities require a certain amount of control. Would it not be better to admit that we are not as free and autonomous as we would like to believe? To be open about choosing the forms of control to which we will submit? Why not get scientific about the forms of control that are most effective? This is the essence of behaviorism. Punishment, according to Skinner, is a clumsy way of dealing with people who have not understood and reacted properly to society's larger goals. A better way is to change behaviors by reinforcing alternative courses of action. You can't give people a purpose or intention, but you can make some behaviors more attractive and others less so. Given the massive shaping power of the environment, Skinner wrote, it is a much better use of a culture's resources to proceed to the design of better environments rather than of better men. We can't change a mind. We can only change the environment that may prompt someone to act differently. Links in a chain. Skinner's point was that we spend a huge amount of energy upholding the ethic of individualism, when as a species we could achieve more by focusing on the type of environmental situations that produce remarkable achievements. He did not deny that there were great people who had made tremendous contributions, but he believed we would produce more such people not through an ethic of triumphant individualism, but through creating more conducive environments. Skinner put it in these terms: although cultures are improved by people whose wisdom and compassion may supply clues to what they do or will do, the ultimate improvement comes from the environment which makes them wise and compassionate. What we consider traits of character are really the culmination of a history of environmental reinforcement. In short, Skinner believed that we had put human beings on a pedestal. While Hamlet was made to say of man, "How like a god," Skinner also notes Pavlov's observation of us, "How like a dog." Skinner felt that we were more than a dog, and marveled at the complexity of human beings and their actions, yet he also said we were no different than dogs in being able subjects of scientific analysis. While poets, writers, philosophers, and authors had long celebrated the inner motive that guided the human self, Skinner's clinical definition was, "A self is a repertory of behavior, appropriate to a given set of contingencies." What about conscience and morality? Skinner had this to say: man is not a moral animal in the sense of possessing a special trait or virtue. He has built a kind of social environment which induces him to behave in moral ways. Although Skinner believed that each person was unique, down to every fiber of their body, he also felt this was missing the point. Each individual was a stage in a process that began a long time before they came into existence, and would continue long after they had gone. Within this larger context, was it not foolish to make a lot of noise about individuality? Surely it was more productive to see ourselves as a link in a long chain, shaped by our genetic history and environment, but also with the capacity to shape that environment in turn. Final comments. Beyond Freedom and Dignity attracted a great deal of controversy when it was published, as it seemed to undermine the ethic of personal freedom. But were Skinner's ideas really that dangerous? Freedom is a wonderful concept, but cultures and communities, by their very nature, require a dense apparatus of control to survive. Skinner described the evolution of a culture as a kind of gigantic exercise in self-control, which was no different to the way that individuals organize their life to ensure their continuing existence and prosperity. Control was, therefore, a fact of life. His point was that it was possible to create cultures in which there were less aversionary controls, such as the threat of punishment, and more positive ones that people freely agreed to. This was the scenario sketched out in his fictional utopian classic, Walden 2. On the surface, this sounds like early communism, but the key difference is that the communist ideology was built around a misplaced faith in human nature. In contrast, behaviorism aimed to analyze scientifically how humans really act. Any culture deriving from its ideas would not be built on a vain hope, but observable facts. One of Skinner's most fascinating points, which perhaps has relevance for our times, is that cultures that put freedom and dignity above all else, that take the romantic view of psychology concerning the freedom of the inner person and so on, risk being surpassed by other cultures that put their survival first. Countries may pride themselves on being right, but such inflexibility does not always guarantee a future. If you have always firmly held to an Ayn Rand-like belief in personal responsibility, free will, and the primacy of the individual, Skinner may cause a revolution in your thinking. Did he actually believe that the idea of the individual should be abolished? No. Simply that of the inner person, who is said to heroically manipulate their environment to their ends. We don't change humans by being scientific about them, Skinner remarked, any more than Isaac Newton's analysis of a rainbow lessened its beauty. While Skinner remains unfashionable, he had a major influence across a range of areas. In time, the popular view of him as the cold man of the lab may well change to reflect the reality of someone who knew that there was too much at stake to gamble with ideologies and romantic ideas of humanity. In aiming to find a scientific basis for improving our lot, he was a genuine humanitarian. B.F. Skinner. Boris Frederick Fred Skinner was born in 1904 in Susquehanna, a small railroad town in Pennsylvania, United States. His father was a lawyer and his mother a housewife. Skinner attended Hamilton College in New York, graduating with a B.A. in English, and had dreams of becoming a writer. He lived a bohemian life in Greenwich Village in New York for a while, but with no real success in his poetry and short story writing, and having come across writings by Pavlov and John B. Watson, behaviorism's founder, he applied to study psychology at Harvard University. At Harvard, he completed his master's degree and doctorate, undertook research, and taught. It was at the University of Minnesota, 1937 to 1945, and the University of Indiana, 1945 to 1948, where he was chairman of the psychology department, that Skinner did much of the experimentation that made him well known. He returned to Harvard in 1947 as the William James Lecturer, later becoming Edgar Pierce Professor of Psychology. Skinner's many honors included the National Medal of Science, awarded in 1968 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Books include The Behavior of Organisms, 1938, Walden II, 1948, Verbal Behavior, 1957, famously criticized by Noam Chomsky, Science and Human Behavior, 1953, and About Behaviorism, 1974. His three-part autobiography was published as Particulars of My Life, 1976, The Shaping of a Behaviorist, 1979, and A Matter of Consequences, 1983. Skinner died of leukemia in 1990. Chapter 48. Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. The following are quotes from their 1999 book, Difficult Conversations. The people we've worked with report less anxiety and greater effectiveness in all of their conversations. They find they are less afraid of what others might say. They have a heightened sense of freedom of action in tough situations, more self-confidence, and a stronger sense of integrity and self-respect. They also learn that, more often than not, dealing constructively with tough topics and awkward situations strengthens a relationship. And that's an opportunity too good to pass up. In a nutshell, difficult conversations carry the chance to transform a relationship, but only if you shift your stance from delivering a message to discovering why the other person is acting as they are. Books in a similar vein. Robert Bolton's People Skills, Robert Cialdini's Influence, Susan Forward's Emotional Blackmail, and Carl Rogers' On Becoming a Person. Life is full of difficult conversations, yet we all avoid having them. Is there anything we can do to make them less difficult? Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most, grew out of 15 years of work at the Harvard Negotiation Project, which also produced the $4 million selling negotiation title Getting to Yes. As part of the project, authors Stone, Patton, and Heen had a goal to find out how one-on-one communication could be made vastly more effective. They worked with students and professionals on their toughest conversations and encounters to produce new techniques for understanding conflict and interaction. Although their backgrounds are in negotiation, mediation, and law, the authors of Difficult Conversations base their work on findings in organizational behavior, cognitive therapies, social psychology, and communication theory, particularly as they relate to communication dynamics within families. Psychologists Aaron Beck, David Burns, and Carl Rogers are mentioned among their many influences. The result is a remarkable guide that lets us in on the powerful techniques that have been employed in world trouble spots to bring opposite sides together and forge new futures. What is a difficult conversation? Defining their subject as anything you find it difficult to talk about and try to avoid, Stone, Patton, and Heen note that for most people there are no simple or easy ways to 1. Fire someone, 2. Break up a relationship, 3. Confront your mother-in-law. 4. Raise the issue of prejudice. And 5. Ask for a raise. They liken a difficult message to throwing a hand grenade, which, coated with sugar, thrown hard or soft, is still going to do damage. Throwing it tactfully is no answer. Neither is it enough to be diplomatic. We can't hope that our niceness will ensure that all goes smoothly. So what is the answer? Instead of throwing hand grenades or delivering messages to people, Stone, Patton, and Heen promise to transform our difficult conversations by replacing them with what they call learning conversations. While this new way of communicating involves work to master it, it can dramatically reduce the stress of our interactions with other people. Learning conversations increase the confidence of all parties involved because the air of blame disappears, to be replaced by listening. This naturally raises trust and confidence all around. Conflict can be transmuted into understanding. 3 conversations in 1. Difficult conversations is based on the idea that each difficult conversation is really 3 conversations. Above and beyond the actual words that are spoken, these other conversations are mostly internal and involve our perception of the encounter and what it means to us. The "what happened" conversation. This is when we go through our perceptions of the outcome. Who said what? Who is to blame? Who is right? The problem is we never question our version of who is right or wrong, and neither do we question that difficult conversations are about getting the facts right, as opposed to what they mean. They are essentially conflicts of perceptions, interpretations, and values. However, when we shift our attitude from delivering a message to finding out how the other person sees things differently, immediately the conversation becomes less heavy and emotionally barbed. Instead of offering our interpretation of the situation as the truth, we offer it as our perception. The feelings conversation. How do I feel about what was said? Were the other person's feelings valid? Are my feelings valid? What should I do if the other person is angry or hurt? Many strong feelings enter into a difficult conversation, but these are often not expressed. When 2 people are talking, there is a parallel conversation going on in each of their minds concerning their feelings about the interaction. Given that feelings cloud judgment and make things uncomfortable, shouldn't we try to steer clear of feelings altogether? Should we just try to stick to the facts? While this is a nice idea, Stone, Patton, and Heen note that leaving feelings out of difficult conversations is like having an opera without music. We may get the plot, but we totally miss the point. They point out that difficult conversations do not just involve feelings. They are, at their very core, about feelings. The identity conversation. Does what we have just said to the other person, or what they have just said to us, shake our sense of who we are? Has the conversation made us suddenly feel we are, at heart, a bad person, or incompetent, or a traitor? The identity conversation is about self-image or self-esteem. If we are having a meeting with our boss to request a raise, we get nervous. This is because whether or not we get the raise will involve our boss's and our own consideration of our value. It's not just about the money, it's about us. Similarly, if we are the boss and have to fire someone, what does this act say about us as a person? That we are a heartless bastard? Firing someone is only partly about them. Just being aware of the identity conversation we have with ourselves can have a great effect on our difficult conversations. If we know it's also about our self-image, we are less likely to suddenly lose our balance on an emotional level. When we understand that difficult conversations are actually 3 conversations going on at once, and when we are aware of the mistakes we can make in each type, Stone, Patton, and Heen believe that we will shift the focus of our conversations. They become less about right or wrong and more about learning what is at issue. Most difficult conversations involve a strong element of pointing the finger, but all this does is create more conflict, denial, and incorrect judgments. Blame can only ever cloud the matter, preventing us from finding out what went wrong. The alternative to blame is joint contribution. Instead of trying to find out where the finger should be pointed, we work to ascertain what contributed to the problem. This is a subtle shift from the persons to the issues involved. Our stance turns from proving a point or putting someone in their place to curiosity and joint problem solving. Listening to each other's stories. To get from blame to contribution first involves listening. How does the other person see the situation? And what happened to form that perception? One of the author's rules is, people never change without first feeling understood. Telling someone to do something makes it less likely that they will, while understanding may just break down their wall of resistance. For instance, Trevor is annoyed that Karen is not handing in her paperwork on time. But for her part, Karen will only consider this important if Trevor stops to understand why she might be doing that. When they do actually sit down to talk about it, Trevor finds out that Karen is not doing it because she is lazy or spiteful, but because she has to put her demanding clients first. She in turn hears from Trevor how non-submission of the paperwork causes him all sorts of problems. When they are both understood, they are in a position to work something out, but not before. As Stone, Patton, and Heen put it, to get anywhere in a disagreement, we need to understand the other person's story well enough to see how their conclusions make sense within it. Surely, though, there will be times when we know we are right, and the other person is wrong. Aren't we right if we try to stop our daughter from smoking? Perhaps, but in many situations, being right is not the issue. Our daughter will know smoking is bad for her as much as we do. The conflict may be more about getting rid of her good girl image and becoming more independent. Once the daughter feels that her change in identity is understood, she may not need to continue smoking. Don't get emotional. Express feelings. Careful expression of feelings is a vital part of making difficult conversations productive. Stone, Patton, and Heen have many wise things to say on this, including, if we try to suppress feelings, they tend to come out anyway through change of voice tone, body language, and facial expression. We shouldn't confuse being emotional with the clear expression of emotions, such as, I feel hurt, or I feel angry, and do not translate feelings into judgments about the other person. It is very hard for some people to begin a sentence or conversation with the words, I feel, but saying them may make the other person really listen. We shouldn't disavow the feelings we have. They are real. Be aware that good people can have bad feelings. And finally, our feelings are as important as others' feelings. Yet when we deny their validity, we can sabotage our relationships. For example, if we bury anger for our spouse, we will not be able to love them properly again until we express it. The dangers of all or nothing thinking. Difficult conversations, the authors note, are a threat to our identity. Their scariness comes not only from us having to face an issue with another person, but facing up to the truth of the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. Self-image is actually hardwired into our adrenal response, which explains why we may feel a rush of anxiety or anger or a sudden desire to flee the scene. If, for instance, we go to the boss to ask for a raise, and she says no on the basis that she has questions about our performance this year, our horror at being rejected can make us take either of two attitudes. Defiance, we want to defend ourselves and our record, or exaggeration, the boss is right, we don't deserve a raise. Both responses involve all or nothing thinking. We are either a saint or the devil, excellent at what we do or incompetent. All or nothing thinking is a weak foundation for our sense of identity and makes us vulnerable to every little criticism. But this debilitating type of thinking, which particularly comes into play in difficult conversations, is not based on reality. Rarely are we one extreme or the other. These reactions oversimplify the world. The answer is to complexify our identity. Appreciate that while we may have come up short on some projects this year, on several others we were outstanding, And overall, our performance is such that we believe we deserve a raise. Remember that difficult conversations are a fantastic opportunity to get closer to the truth, to become learning experiences without the usual emotional charge. Instead of going in there to deliver our message, we want a raise, in the context of the interview with our boss, we can say, I wonder if it would make sense if my salary were increased. It's not a demand, so the boss does not become defensive, and we are not vulnerable to rejection either. We are both exploring, getting information about the situation, so whatever is the outcome, neither will feel hijacked, and at the very least, we will have learnt something. Final comments. We have only touched on some of the issues and techniques raised in difficult conversations. It is a book to keep and refer to often whenever you have an important matter to raise with someone. Given that it was written by 3 people, it flows well, and there are plenty of real examples to keep things interesting. One omission is the lack of a bibliography, even though the authors are clearly influenced by many thinkers who have gone before them. The most refreshing aspect of difficult conversations is the absence of any manipulative techniques. Its aim is not to teach us how to psychologically trick people into agreeing to what we want, but to change the whole atmosphere of important encounters so that curiosity about each party's needs and desires leads to new appreciation and understanding. As wrong assumptions and blame are taken out of the equation, what is left is the truth. Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, Sheila Heen. Stone is a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School and is a partner in Triad, a consulting firm specializing in leadership, negotiation, and communication. He has worked as a mediator in South Africa, Cyprus, Colombia, and Ethiopia, and consulted to the World Health Organization. Patton is deputy director of the Harvard Negotiation Project and founder of Vantage, a consulting firm. He has also played key roles in international negotiation efforts, including the process leading up to the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa, and talks between the United States and Iran during the 1980 hostage crisis. He co-wrote with Roger Fisher and William Ury the second edition of Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In, 1991. And finally, Heen is a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School, and, as well as consulting work with corporate clients, has helped in resolving conflicts between Greek and Turkish Cypriots, and mediated in industrial disputes. Chapter 49. William Styron. The following are quotes from his 1990 book, Darkness Visible. In rereading for the first time in years sequences from my novels, passages where my heroines have lurched down the pathways towards doom, I was stunned to perceive how accurately I had created the landscape of depression in the minds of these young women. Thus, depression, when it finally came to me, was in fact no stranger, not even a visitor unannounced. It had been tapping at my door for decades. Even those for whom any kind of therapy is a futile exercise can look forward to the eventual passing of the storm. If they survive the storm itself, its fury almost always fades and then disappears. Mysterious in its coming, mysterious in its going, the affliction runs its course, and one finds peace. In a nutshell, depression can afflict anyone, and its causes are sometimes mysterious. Books in a similar vein. David D. Burns' Feeling Good, R.D. Laing's The Divided Self, and Robert E. Thayer's The Origin of Everyday Moods. It was while visiting Paris in December 1985 that American novelist William Styron finally realized he was suffering from a depressive illness. He was in the city in order to accept a major award, an experience he would normally have found a boost to his ego and enjoyed. But in the midst of his mental darkness, the presentation and gala dinner that followed became an excruciating ordeal. Having to pretend he was normal made it even worse. By the evening, when he had a dinner with his publisher, he could not manage even a forced smile, and could only think of getting back to the United States to see a psychiatrist. Darkness Visible, A Memoir of Madness, is Styron's classic account of his battle with depression. originally a lecture delivered to the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and then published as an acclaimed essay in Vanity Fair magazine. Its literary quality makes it stand out from the hundreds of other titles on the subject. Describing the indescribable. Styron notes that depression is different from other maladies in that, if you have never experienced it, you cannot imagine what it is like. So different to the blues, or regular doldrums that affect most people in the course of normal life. That it is not describable to others has only increased the mystery and taboo around it, for if everyone could understand what it was like, there would be no shame involved. Sympathy is not really the same as understanding. Styron's best approximation of the feeling is that of drowning or suffocation, but he admits even that is not quite right. One becomes like a zombie, still able to walk and talk, but no longer feeling quite human. Among depression's features, Styron identifies 1. Intense self-hatred and feelings of worthlessness. 2. Thoughts or fantasies of suicide. 3. Insomnia. 4. Confusion, inability to focus, memory lapses. 5. Hypochondria, the mind's way of not facing up to its own disintegration, blaming the body. And 6. Loss of libido and appetite. Styron also notes the idiosyncratic nature of the black dog. For instance, most sufferers begin the day poorly, often unable to get out of bed, and their mood lightens only as the day goes on. Styron seemed to be the opposite, usually quite together in the morning, but by the afternoon dark clouds had gathered, and he experienced almost unbearable feelings and thoughts into the evening. Only some time after the evening meal did he again experience some respite. Normally a good sleeper, he had to take a prescription tranquilizer to snatch even 2 or 3 hours of slumber. He discovered that depression ebbs or only becomes rampant according to the hour of the day because physiologically it involves a disruption of the circadian rhythms, which play a strong part in daily mood cycles. Styron also reports a helpless stupor in which normal thinking and logic disappear. Taken to its extreme, depression literally turns people mad. Stress on the neurotransmitters causes a depletion of the brain chemicals norepinephrine and serotonin, and an increase of the hormone cortisol. These chemical and hormonal imbalances create an organ in convulsion that makes the person feel stricken. He rues the fact that the word brainstorm has already been taken in the English language, because the image of a storm raging inside the brain conveys its violent power, fierce, seemingly unrelenting, clouding everything. The Greatest Taboo. Styron writes about his literary inspiration, Albert Camus, whose novels he had discovered relatively late. He had actually arranged to meet Camus when the news came of the novelist's death. Despite never knowing him, Styron felt a great loss. Camus had often battled depression, and many of his novels explore the theme of suicide. Styron devotes a fair portion of Darkness Visible to discussing people he knows who suffer from depression. He wonders how his friend, Romain Gary, a distinguished author, former diplomat, bon vivant, and womanizer, could become a person who put a bullet to his brain. If someone like this could decide that life was not worth living, could it not happen to anyone? Families of the dead find it hard to accept that their relative could take their own life. The reason we have a taboo against suicide is that we believe that it indicates cowardice, taking the easy way out, when in fact it is more about an inability to endure the pain of being alive any longer. We forgive people who kill themselves to end physical pain, yet not mental distress. These days, Styron notes, with greater care and awareness about the condition, most people do not end up killing themselves as a result of depression. But if they do, he suggests, there should be no more reproof attached than to the victims of terminal cancer. Styron observes that artistic types have a greater susceptibility to depression, hence the long roll call of their suicides, including Hart Crane, Vincent van Gogh, Virginia Woolf, Ernest Hemingway, Diane Arbus, and Mark Rothko. Vladimir Mayakovsky, a Russian poet, condemned his countryman Sergei Esenin's suicide, only to take his own life a few years later. What message can we take from this? That we should never be judgmental, because those left alive cannot feel or even imagine how people who commit suicide really feel. Mysterious causes. Part of the reason that depression can be difficult to treat is that it often has no single identifiable cause. Genetics, chemical imbalances, and past experience and behavior may all be important, but to treat one aspect may leave out another. One can attribute a major depression to a particular crisis, but as Styron notes, most people who go through bad things come out remarkably okay and do not descend into a spiral of illness. This suggests that, rather than the event being the cause, it may simply have been a trigger for an underlying depressive potential lying dormant. This is what Styron believes happened with him. He gave up drinking for health reasons, and this allowed his demons, no longer deadened by alcohol, to fly out of their cave. With his shield against a sort of permanent anxiety gone, he had to feel everything he had narcotized into submission. His first sign of depression was a sort of deadness to things normally delightful to him. Walking his dogs in the woods, or summer on Martha's Vineyard. He turned in on himself, unable to escape a constant barrage of painful thoughts. It may seem obvious, but Styron points to the one element underpinning all depression: loss, whether fear of abandonment, or of being alone, or of losing loved ones. In Styron's case, this seemed correct, as his mother died when he was 13, an early trauma that gave him a deep and early experience of loss. In Darkness Visible, he comes to the view that his actual event of depression was simply the manifestation of a deeper, lifelong anxiety. He realized that, similar to Camus, depression and suicide had been constant themes in his books, and reflects that his depression, when it finally came to me, was in fact no stranger. Not even a visitor unannounced. It had been tapping at my door for decades. He mentions that his father, a shipyard engineer, was also a sufferer. Between the genetic heritage, the early death of his mother, and his artistic sensibility, Styron was probably a prime candidate for the disease. If all else fails, time heals. Psychotherapy does not do much for people in an advanced stage of depression, and Styron found that neither it nor drugs did anything to alleviate his condition. Despite the claims of many doctors, he knew that for serious depression, there is no fast-acting remedy. Antidepressants or cognitive therapy, or a combination of them, may do the job of healing the tortured mind, but neither can be fully depended on. Despite many advances in treatment, there is no magic bullet, no quick-acting vaccine. Depression's causes remain somewhat of a mystery. The denouement of Styron's depression came only after he admitted himself to hospital. He believes that the anonymous stability of the medical routine saved his life, and he wished he had done it sooner. For me, he writes, the real healers were seclusion and time. What he took from the experience was a knowledge that although depression seems permanent to the sufferer, it is actually like a storm whose fury always dies out. As long as you can just stay alive, you will defeat it. He recalls the theme of Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, that we still have an obligation to try to survive, even if there is an absence of hope. Easier said than done, yet nearly all who suffer depression come out the other side relatively unscathed. For those who do come through, a uniquely light or joyous feeling awaits. Final comments. Styron believes that much of the literature around depression is breezily optimistic. Some patients respond well to certain drugs or certain forms of therapy, but we are not so far advanced in our knowledge that definite promises can be made. Sufferers are naturally eager to believe in a quick salvation, but it only sets them up for disappointment when there is no speedy alleviation of misery. Styron was writing over 15 years ago, but the situation has not changed. When you think that depression is a disease that distorts or brings to the fore issues to do with our very sense of self, surely it is not surprising that cures are not instant. Depression does involve imbalances of brain chemicals and may also result from negative internal conversations. But beyond this, it is about the psyche, or overall sense of self. Styron, for instance, was only able to make sense of his depressive bouts by reflecting on the entirety of his life. Some of the causes were indeed physical, a withdrawal from alcohol and an incorrect dosage of tranquilizers, but they went deeper to questions about his identity and past. Only 84 pages long, Darkness Visible will not take you long to read, but could be a great teacher. Although so many creative types have succumbed to depression, it is also their responsibility to try to describe the indescribable, and Styron's attempt is one of the best. Rather than depressing the reader, his essay is strangely uplifting. William Styron. Born in 1925 in Newport News, Virginia, Styron was able to read at an early age and published many short stories in his school newspaper. He obtained a B.A. degree from Duke University, and the following year joined the U.S. Marine Corps, serving as first lieutenant during the last 2 years of the Second World War. After his discharge, he settled in New York, working for the trade division of publisher McGraw-Hill and taking writing classes at the New School for Social Research. He lived in Paris in the early 1950s, where he helped to establish the legendary literary journal Paris Review. His first novel, Lie Down in Darkness, 1951, which followed the suicidal descent of a young woman, was a literary sensation and was awarded the American Academy's Prix de Rome. Other books include the Pulitzer Prize-winning The Confessions of Nat Turner, 1967, and the bestseller and American Book Award winner Sophie's Choice, 1979, made into a film starring Meryl Streep. The award mentioned in Darkness Visible was the Prix Mondial Sino del Duca, given annually to an artist or scientist who has made a significant contribution to humanism. Chapter 50. The last chapter. Robert E. Thayer. The following are quotes from his 1996 book, The Origin of Everyday Moods. If we think of our moods as emphasizing meaning and enhancing or reducing the pleasure in our lives, we can understand how central they really are. In this respect, they are more important than daily activities, money, status, and even personal relationships because these things are usually filtered through our moods. In many ways, our moods are at the core of our being. In a nutshell, given their effect on our quality of life, it is vital that we discover what may cause our moods. Books in a similar vein. David D. Burns' Feeling Good, and Martin Seligman's Authentic Happiness. The conventional wisdom is that moods are caused by stress or thoughts, usually our reactions to particular events or pieces of information. A success can put us in a good mood, a failure in a bad mood. While this is true, it is only part of the mood equation. According to psychologist Robert Thayer, moods are also related to how much sleep we have had, how generally healthy or fit we are, daily cycles or circadian rhythms, what we have eaten, and whether or not we have just exercised. Thayer has been studying mood since the 1970s and is considered the foremost expert on the subject. Convinced by his students to go beyond his more academic writings and produce a book on the practical applications of his theory, the result was the very readable The Origin of Everyday Moods, Managing Energy, Tension, and Stress. Anatomy of a Mood. Thayer defines a mood as a background feeling that persists over time. Moods can be distinguished from emotions in that, while emotions always have an identifiable cause, moods often do not. They have been so little studied compared to emotions because of their ephemeral or elusive nature. Unlike emotions, they can seem to come and go like the wind, seemingly without any trigger. Why is this so? While emotions are generally phenomena tied to what goes on in the brain, moods result from processes going on in both mind and body, with each affecting the other in complex ways. Thayer likens a mood to a thermometer that takes a reading of our current psychological and physiological condition. It exists for a biological purpose, to tell us when we are in danger, or should lie low and regroup, or when we are in a comfort zone and ready for action. Thayer's research led him to the conclusion that most of our moods emerge out of two basic dimensions: energy and tension. A depressed mood is characterized by low energy and high tension, with accompanying feelings of hopelessness, while an optimistic mood involves high energy and low tension. We feel we can accomplish much and are enthusiastic. In short, we can't separate how our body feels from how our mind feels. If we are physically tired, we are also likely to feel edgy, distracted, or brain dead. Similarly, if we are depressed, we will not feel like energizing ourselves through exercise. The 4 basic moods. Thayer argues that all moods can be understood according to 4 basic states along the energy-tension spectrum. 1. Calm energy. A feel-good state, confident, energetic, optimistic. The ideal state for working. Most people have their greatest supply of calm energy in the morning. High energy, low tension. 2. Calm tiredness. The feeling we have just before going to bed. Not stressed, but not energetic either. Low energy, low tension. 3. Tense energy. The feeling we have when racing to a deadline. A sense of urgency is expressed in raised heart rate, thanks to the release of adrenaline, and skeletal muscular tightness. In an evolutionary biology sense, the body's fight-or-flight mode. High energy, high tension. And 4. Tense tiredness. When you feel all used up, as Thayer puts it. Physical tiredness combines with nervous anxiety or tension, negative thoughts. Low energy, high tension. For most people, experienced in the afternoon. A natural low point often exacerbated by lack of sleep the night before, junk food, and use of stimulants like caffeine. Daily rhythms. The circadian rhythm is the daily ebb and flow of our natural physical and mental energies. Our energy rises during the morning and reaches a peak around noon or 1 p.m., declines during the afternoon, rises again as a mini-peak in the early evening, and declines again until bedtime. While most of us are morning people, within the basic circadian rhythm, there are many individual variations. Some people get more energetic as the day goes on, and this is more true of extroverts than introverts. However, for the average person, the peak of tense tiredness comes around 4 p.m., and between 9 and 11 p.m., a decrease in natural energy leads to a rise in tension, the tense tired state, which results in negative feelings, a low or bad mood. When people are trying to stop smoking, after a few days it is rarely the actual withdrawal from the nicotine that prompts a relapse. It is the daily feelings of stress that spark the psychological need to reduce the stress and tension. Relapse to addictions, plus the binging and purging of bulimics, tends to happen in the afternoons when people's energy is low and they need relief from tension. 4:34 p.m. is the average weak point. Awareness of the times when we are most likely to relapse can obviously help us build exercise or some other healthy mood regulator into our daily routine. Regulating our moods. When feeling a bit down or low in energy, we may seek social interaction or withdraw from people, depending on whether we are an introvert or extrovert. Try to control our thoughts, for example, positive thinking. Engage in a pleasant activity, such as a hobby or shopping, or lighten the feeling with humor. Read a book or magazine. Drink alcohol. Have a cigarette. Eat a chocolate bar or cake. Drink coffee. Or watch television. Exercise, the data shows, is the best mood regulator. A brisk walk of 5 to 15 minutes when we are feeling tired paradoxically restores our spirits and can energize us for up to 2 hours. Another excellent, healthy mood regulator is social interaction. Phoning or talking to a friend can lower stress significantly. Another is listening to music, which ranks high on surveys for reducing tension and increasing energy. Food. The effects of what we eat on our mood are difficult to measure scientifically. However, Thayer published a study demonstrating the paradoxical effects of eating sugary snacks. They improve mood in the short term, but also give us a letdown an hour or two later. both in terms of a reduction in energy and a rise in tension. Mood is connected to overeating and dieting, and Thayer suggests that people who consume a lot of sugar get into further bad eating patterns because the drops in energy they create lead to the need for more snacks. Health. Healthy people generally have high energy levels. Ill people have low energy. Research shows that on days when people rate themselves as in a generally negative mood, their immune system response is not as effective as on days when they are in a positive frame of mind. Sleep. Mood is significantly affected by how much sleep we have had, to the extent that sleep deprivation over several nights can lead to depression. Other mood affectors include nicotine. Generates calm energy on a temporary basis, which is perhaps why it is so addictive. Makes us enthused, but also relaxed, briefly. Alcohol, a depressant, but at first provides more energy. Parties show this dynamic. Caffeine produces tense energy, but people seem to desire this. Thayer hypothesizes that while calm energy is the most desirable state, the tense energy effect that coffee or cola produces is a good alternative. And finally, weather. SAD, seasonal affective disorder, or winter depression, which can be alleviated by bright light or melatonin. Why are moods so important? Thayer did an experiment with people who all had a significant personal problem. He asked them to rate how they saw the problem at 5 different times in the day. Intriguingly, after a 10-minute rating period, it emerged that the same problem was perceived as less serious in the morning than in the afternoon, and whenever a person was in a state of tense tiredness, the problem loomed larger. Therefore, if at all possible, it is best not to consider your problems in times of tense tiredness, as they will seem worse than they actually are. At the same time, our thoughts in a period of high energy make us more optimistic than the reality calls for. Current energy levels do not simply affect our mood, but also what we feel we will be capable of in the future. So we need to be aware of how our energy levels influence our ability to make judgments. Thayer's remarkable point is that moods are in fact more important than daily activities, money, status, and even personal relationships, because we experience all of these through the filter of whatever mood we are in. If we are in a dark mood, none of our achievements or our wealth matter to us. In a positive mood, even the worst circumstances seem manageable. Final comments. The Origin of Everyday Moods provides practical pointers on how to be more self-aware about your moods and vulnerable points of tense tiredness. And with that knowledge, it can help you choose healthier ways of mood regulation. You may learn that it is best not to make major life decisions at 3 a.m, a time when notoriously dark thoughts are to be had, or to hold off that confrontation with a coworker at 4 p.m, when your energy level has dropped and feelings of tension have risen. More than the actual tips on the danger times for tense tiredness, the value of Thayer's book is in showing us just how much mood is like an invisible bubble that surrounds us. While on the surface, moods are of no great import, Thayer shows how they are, in fact, basic to our whole being. Other psychological theories may help us to consider our lives as a whole, but the study of mood is arguably more useful, since it concerns how we are feeling on an hour-by-hour basis. And life, after all, is lived in the present. Robert E. Thayer. Robert Thayer has been a professor of psychology at California State University, Long Beach, since 1973. He received a B.A. at the University of Redlands and his Ph.D. from the University of Rochester. In addition to many frequently cited academic articles, he is the author of The Biopsychology of Mood and Arousal, 1989, and Calm Energy, How People Regulate Mood with Food and Exercise, 2001. This has been a Gildan audio presentation. log on to our website at www.gildanmedia.com.